in a minute. We're quite a new site, and we have a vision to be a world-leading regional airport. We've got planning permission to go to 10 million passengers, and we're in the middle of an appeal, so God knows when that will come out, but hopefully, touch wood, we'll be allowed to keep on growing. So just on passengers, 2019 we had 9.2 million passengers, and then unfortunately the pandemic came along. So at the moment we're growing back really strongly, and we expect 2022 to be really a really positive year for us. Just on our catchment, which is important, so our market share is increasing within the southwest. So what that is essentially meaning is that people are travelling further to Bristol Airport. We're sucking people in. So you can see from our catchment area, you go right the way down to West Wales, and then all the way down to Cornwall. So we're pulling people from big distances, which obviously has a big impact on any EVs or any charging that we have. We've been working on decarbonising for 10 years. I'm not going to go through this too much, but CO2 per passenger has almost halved over 10 years between 2008 and 2018. And our public transport usage, that went up by 5%, but we're not blessed with the best infrastructure in the world, which we'll come on to. In 2018, we reviewed our vision to be everyone's favourite airport, and I think the back end of this is where we want to be, delivering a future we can all be proud of. We want to create a legacy, and we want to do the right thing, not just for the UK, but for Bristol and our local communities. I think that's really important, that we're just not going to try and be another airport that just grows organically. We are going to try and do things differently. One of our strategic intents is to deliver a sustainable and greener future, and that's exactly what we're trying to do at the moment. So really quickly, our emissions. So you've got scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. So scope 1 is essentially our fleets, everything to do with cooling, heating, doing anything to do with the site. So running that site. Scope 2, you add electric in, and scope 3, you add in all of the journeys to and from the airport, but also your aircraft. Now the aircraft, obviously, that's a major topic that we're working really hard on separately. So we gave an undertaking to be carbon neutral by 2025. We actually brought that forward, and now we are carbon neutral in 2021. So in the longer term, we're really looking at spending our money now on not making it carbon neutral, but net zero. So we have given an undertaking to be the first net zero airport by 2030. And that's quite an ambitious statement to make for an airport, but that's something that we will have to work on in the long term. So that is scope 1 and 2. Scope 3 will take a little longer, because obviously hydrogen planes and battery planes aren't going to be quite with us by 2030, but the industry has got a lot of clever people in it who are working really hard, and we are confident that by the mid-2030s that will sort itself out. Okay, so very quickly, our emissions. You'll see our total carbon is only about 6,500 tonnes. I say only, it's 6,500 tonnes. But we are an efficient airport, and we do have new infrastructure, so it is really efficient, and we are looking at how to make it even better. You'll see that the electricity is by far our biggest consumer of carbon. And that's something that we are working on behind the scenes as well, to look at generation ourselves. So if you look at that 6,500 tonnes, that is actually dwarfed by the number of people who travel to and from the airport, and the amount of carbon that produces. And even our staff generate more carbon travelling to and from the airport than actually running the airport itself. So there's 7,500 tonnes of carbon from our staff, and 185,000 tonnes from passengers travelling to and from the airport. Now all of that is scope 3, so that's something we're working on beyond the 2030. This is a longer burn. We also have another couple of issues that don't help us. Bristol Airport, as I said, isn't blessed with the best infrastructure. So this is quite a telling slide that we've got 9 million passengers. We're actually overtook Glasgow pre-pandemic in terms of passenger numbers, but we are the only airport in that top echelon, if you like, not to have a rail link, not to have a motorway connection, not to have a dual carriageway, and we mainly rely on bus connections in terms of public transport. So it's really difficult to get more people into public transport. And just on that slide, Luton Airport are just about to go live with what they call the DART, which will connect up the main line into St Pancras, and Glasgow Airport are looking to roll out a tram service. So we will definitely be in the southwest, probably the poor relations. So how are we going to do it? Net zero fleet. I'll come on to that. We're looking at making the airfield itself net zero as well, and also our buildings. We're looking at lots of energy reduction throughout the airport and looking at ways of generating electricity and moving everything over to sustainable fuels. So a couple of examples, just one quick example. This is a car rental building we built on the south of the airfield. Literally last week we went live with a new 250 kilowatt solar array on top of there. So now that building has negative carbon consumption. And it's home to 600 car hire vehicles. So we've got low carbon technology in the building, but unfortunately we don't have many meaningful EVs being offered by our car hire companies. That's something we'd really love to see and to really push that, because that's quite a big use of carbon. So what's the opportunity of EVs? So all of these figures that you see, they baselined off 8 million passengers, because that's where we think we're going to end up in the next few years. And obviously then we're going to grow back towards 10 and then beyond to 12 by 2030. So the carbon from our vehicles, 193 tons. On-site vehicles is just 825 tons. So we expect that obviously to increase as passengers increase by circa 25 to 30%. Okay. There are 660 vehicles just around the airport, moving around doing their day-to-day thing. We own roughly 150 of them, and then there's 450 that are owned by airlines and ground handlers and people like that. Okay, and we are formulating our plans now to revolutionise our fleets. In the next 10 years, we expect to spend over £20 million just on our fleet of 150 vehicles, and that's everything from a 4x4 to vans to our buses, right across the piece. So we're going to start with the most oldest, the most inefficient. We don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. If we've got efficient vehicles, we want to get the life out of them first. And we believe that over 440 of the 660 vehicles on site could be EVs in the future, which is quite good. And we've just got a little Jet2. They're our first, so there's a bit of two firsts going on. They're our first airline to commit to 100% EVs on all their support vehicles. So we are their first airport, and they are our first airline. So this is a bit of a jump into the unknown, but that is going to go live in 2022. And one of our airlines, Jet2, have given a commitment going forward that they will not buy an internal combustion engine ever again. So that's quite positive. So here's our first EV vehicle at Airside in terms of major scale. We've got vans and stuff, but this is our first major scale. So this is a conversion of a Cobus. So that's 7 years old. So going back to embedded carbon, and we don't want to throw the baby out the bathwater. There are ways to convert the existing vehicles. So we're spending 280,000 on this vehicle, and this will come in March of next year. And from there, we're gonna roll it through. So this is just our first toe in the water to make sure that we are doing the right thing. It works for us, but we have plans then to roll out the rest of the fleet. Unfortunately, we don't think every vehicle can be EV. That's just because obviously uptime, the battery capacity, and flexibility, and the lack of manufacturers. So for example, a 6x6 fire vehicle, nobody makes an EV version of them. And we probably wouldn't want to be the first people to buy one of them. We wouldn't want anything running out of the charge in the middle of an emergency. Snow vehicles, similar. These things have got huge uptime and they are workhorses. So when they're working, you just don't have the time to charge them. And even things like our landside fleet of buses, they run for 20 hours of the day. Will EV really work with that? So these are all things that we're looking at. So on to our passengers and staff. As I said, 192,000 tonnes of carbon, okay? Unmitigated with growth, we think that could go up to circa 250,000 tonnes of carbon, just driving to and from the airport, okay? But we are forecasting by 2030 through battery technology, hybrid technology, we could reduce that to 100,000 tonnes, and that gives us obviously added benefits of clean air, noise, local nuisance, and all of those things are really important to cut out. And we are looking into now into staff schemes to incentivise EV and reduce CO2 in the long term. We do have dedicated charging on site already for staff, so that's something we're really looking at now. So that's something we're hoping to get sorted by Q1 next year. And we're also looking at ways to incentivise EV usage on site for our passengers. So for example, drop-off charges, can you differentiate your charges for an EV vehicle versus an internal combustion engine vehicle? Now that's difficult because obviously you've got to tie in with DVLA, but there are actually ways of doing it. And we're also looking at possibly green tariffs for parking, etc., where you can start to pull people into the airport using greener means rather than internal combustion engines. And we are looking to make EV far more convenient to use on site. We do have charging, but it is limited, so we're looking to do something a bit different. So just on charging, we need two separate offers. So there's two different worlds. There's landside and there's airside. So airside charging is all your ground handling equipment, buses, anything that you basically see on the aprons. So we're going for open charge point protocol, which is something that was picked up earlier. We don't want to be tied into anything that's inflexible. And we want to link that to our access control system. So basically, we've got a little pass, you swipe it, and all your billing just works directly. So it all integrates, make it nice and simple for our people on site, because if we don't make it simple, they're not going to use it. So we are considering two large airside charging hubs with fast charging capability in both. So you look at 350 kilowatt chargers, but also smaller chargers then for stuff that can trickle feed. In terms of landside charging, we're looking for obviously something for staff, passenger vehicles, and our EV fleets. We looked at putting in chargers for every parking space, but we gave up when it came to about 20,000 installations. We just thought, this is ridiculous, we can't do this. So instead, we're looking to install high-speed charging hub. We plan to tender and market test that early next year, and we want to be open in 2024 with that. So that's something we really want to push quite hard. And we're also looking at some premium charging, probably in a multi-story, to be able to allow people who want to trickle charge that capability. But we will leave that for premium, because obviously we just can't literally put that many charging points in. It'll be off the scale. So just in preparation for our push into the charging world, we've placed an order with Western Power Distribution, which will obviously triple the size of our site feed, and we're working at ways to provide a separate feed ready for any landside charging hub, be it a grid serve or something like that. We are looking at ways of getting that ready to go, ready baked, so we have that capacity available when we push the button. So that's something we're really working on. And going alongside that, we are looking at solar feeds and how solar could integrate in with that. But I'm glad to hear that somebody said earlier, batteries are probably not the answer, and that's a conclusion we've probably come to as well, that batteries probably be hugely expensive. We'll be throwing them away in not a very long term, and we don't think it's actually the answer. Just on a plan, really simple, you'll see that we've got airside charging hub, which are the red dots, the multi-story, which is our premium, and then we're thinking something around a charging near the A38, which would be helpful. But obviously that isn't set in stone. This is all subject to planning and everything else that goes with it. So that's something that we are working on and something that we feel will be really beneficial for not just the airport, but for the local community as well. We are rural. We are in a rural area. So we think, you know, there's got to be some upside to living near to an airport. So we've got to give something back. So this would just be another way that we could look at helping the local community. Okay, so in conclusion, you know, we will become net zero by 2030. On-site carbon is an area where we feel we can really make big strides and achieve net zero, and EVs will be a big part of that, be a massive part of that. Passenger travel to and from the airport, you just showed you, it's got greater carbon generation, so that's something we really need to move into quite quickly, which is scope 3 emission. So it's very, very prevalent that we start moving our EVs. Our catchment, our location and public transport links means that probably there's no silver bullet, that we're just not going to decarbonize by chance. So EV is essential, and it needs to become part of airport life, and it needs to be, that's a major benefit going forward. That has to be part of our plans going forward. We need to look at ways to consider how we incentivize EV take-up, and we need to provide fast and reliable means of charging on site for people with longer journeys and local community use. So obviously that longer catchment, that bigger catchment, is something that we really need to consider as well. And we need to implement power network changes to enable growth. So that's something we are working on behind the scenes, and we have placed orders on now to start moving in that direction. So thank you very much. And are there any questions? I'll try to keep you as quick as I can so you can have lunch.
Thank you, Andrew. That was very insightful and very progressive. I'm a member of the Jet Zero Council, and whilst the focus is on about trying to have guilt-free flights over the Atlantic by a certain date,
yeah,
it's fantastic that the airports are also embracing the broader net zero implementations as well. Any questions from the audience? Yes, there's a young man at the back, Jacob, who works at the REA. So
don't make it too difficult. We're just for lunch, right?
I don't even have to introduce myself now. That was thank you, Nina. I'm fortunate enough to have worked with a major UK airport in trying to roll out EV charging infrastructure previously. And one of the quirks of the business case for electric vehicles in an airport environment, particularly airside, is that a lot of the vehicles aren't taxed. They have statutory off-road notifications. So what that meant is that they can access red diesel. And then combined with that, the actual electricity cost airside was very high. I think it was 20 pence per kilowatt hour wholesale. Yep. And so that stacked the odds against EVs massively. The question I have for you is, what do you think the implications of the removal of red diesel from airside vehicles will have for the wider business case for electric vehicles?
Yeah, so red diesel, as you said, is going 1st of April next year. So everybody's on white diesel. We are looking at alternative fuels at the moment, and I'm working with our partners to try and get them across to some alternative low carbon fuels next year as well. That isn't set in stone, but not unhelpfully, the spike in fuel costs at the moment have actually brought that very close to each other. So we think we'll probably get some take up on that, and that's something we're working on quickly. Unfortunately, I'm going to be frank and honest, the industry has taken an absolute battering over the last 2 years, absolute battering. And a lot of our third parties need time now to basically to replenish the coffers before investing. So if you're a ground handler, for example, you're on low margins anyway, and they haven't had the best of times. So we think that in the short term, we're going to have to look at some kind of green fuels. But within 2 to 3 years, we think the take-up for electric will be far higher. We're undertaking a lot of studies with people like EasyJet. So we're looking at net zero turnarounds for aircraft. We're looking at alternative ways of working and you know, dealing with aircraft and the airside environment. The airside environment is quite good, because there are quite a lot of downtimes in between flights. You can charge vehicles. So we think we can make it work, but you're right, the wholesale cost of electric is important. That's why we're looking at possibly PPAs along the way as well, to bring our net cost of electric down, so that we can at least pass on some of that upside to our third parties. It won't be all of it, because obviously we won't be able to generate that much, but maybe we can create a blended rate. And that's something we're looking at with our third parties, to see if we can create win-wins, because I think the only way we're going to get this to work is by collaborating and working together. If we work the way we've always worked, we'll always get what we've always had.
I think that's so true, and it's really progressive to hear that. I have received one question. Oh, there's a hand up over there, so let's have this question.
Maybe you do your question first, because mine is far away somehow.
Okay. Okay. Well, maybe I will try this one, but you have got the microphone as well. So Steve Ward from Transport for Wales was asking about, your views about the car hire companies. The traditional car hire companies seem far behind the curve on EVs. Virtually none across the UK. Do you have any insight as to why this is, and whether they have any plans to introduce EVs?
Okay.
Because this is kind of like your scope 3 type of work, isn't
absolutely.
it?
Yeah, so I'll tell you honestly where we are. We're undertaking, we've started about probably about 8 or 9 months ago. We went to every user of a vehicle on site and third parties. So for example, the car hire companies, and we just said to them, what have you got today? What are you going to be in by 12 million, and how much of that do you plan to be electric? And frankly, we had radio silence from our car hire companies. Thankfully, I think the penny is dropping, but I think they're a little bit behind the rest of us in our thinking. It's new, so we are trying desperately to engage with them. There are now offshoots coming off the traditional car hire companies. For example, we're dealing with Enterprise, who are looking at EVs as a separate entity within their organization. But I don't think it's going to be quick, but the penny is definitely dropping. But I think they're probably a year behind where we are.
I think, those kind of questions on them will make people sit up. And it's only when you work closely with collaborators that you realize how serious you are, that they have to start to move as well. So maybe we can have this question from the back here. Please say your name and where you're from. Thank you.
Sure, this is Just Stepanek from Austria. I'm working for Has2Be ChargePoint, and taking the topic even further, electric vehicle could be an airplane as well. I read that the Cessna is already flying, new Cessna's rebuilt, 150 miles or so. So I wonder, talking to some expert here, if there are already plans to have airside charging stations for airplanes. So are there any plans, anything new you can tell us about this?
I thought you were supposed to ask me easy questions before lunch. Right, so there's 2 strands of work going on. So the first strand of work is hydrogen. For long haul flights, we think hydrogen is the only way to go, being honest with you. So that's something that we're working with the airlines, the operators of hydrogen plants, together with the manufacturers. And we're undertaking trials at Bristol Airport, conference last week, where we've given an undertaking to do that. In the battery side of things, we think that will be limited probably to anything less than about an hour and a half of flying. You could probably do it. We think longer sectors than that, you're kind of on the cusp. The only problem we've got as an airport is quite simple. How much power is one of these things going to need to plug in? It's not like plugging in your phone. It's going to take a lot of power. We're thinking, half a megawatt, possibly. I don't know. And how long does it take? Because the airlines traditionally will want to turn an aircraft in a maximum of about 20 to 30 minutes. So is that enough time to get it onto stand, charged and ready to go? So we're working at the moment with two strands, hydrogen and the battery guys. So two strands going on. It's very much in its infancy. We are also looking at vertical landing takeoff, so drone type technology as well. For some, like one of your speakers spoke about earlier, on top of buildings. So we are looking at that as well. But again, that's 0.5 megawatt. So but that's probably closer to reality in the short term than aircraft. We think that aircraft would probably be the end of this decade if you're going to go electric, but it won't be. You won't be going to Spain, we don't think, on something like that. It would be mainly domestic or at the most close continental flying.
Are there any further questions? Yes, we have one. Oh, see now we have lunch. It's not going to be till 2 o'clock at this rate.
That's fine.
The gentleman right at the back.
Thank you. I'm David Walker from AV Energy. Thank you, Andrew. I had the pleasure of traveling from your airport quite a bit when I lived in this part of the world, and to see what you've done and to see you leading the charge is great to see. I always think it's interesting when you look at an airport in terms of the people who are using that, the reasons for them traveling, and I'm sure that you have the insights on the average time away that people spend when they do travel from your airport. So there'll be the day trippers, but then there'll be those who are traveling for an extended period. And I think there's an opportunity for those people who are traveling to your airport by a car to actually charge them in a really efficient way. So you don't need to charge them at peak times. You can shift that charge to the most effective, lowest carbon, lowest cost. Yeah. But I was interested to hear you say that you looked at the 20,000 parking spaces and said that that wasn't viable to charge every space. I was interested in how many spaces do you imagine will have the ability to charge EVs, on the basis that in the next 20 years or so, the vast majority of cars coming to the airport will need charging? Okay,
so there's a couple of strands to that. Firstly, we think battery technology in cars themselves will improve. You've only got to look at where BMW, etc., are now going. From where they were 5 years ago, you can get double the range out of that. So we think there's going to be a bit of, and I'm going to say it, you probably don't want to charge your car up in an airport because you're going to pay a premium. Let's be blunt. So there's going to be a bit of people saying, we'll charge up at home, we'll be able to go there and back without the charge. There will be a proportion of that, because it's like charging on a motorway. It's going to be more expensive. There's no getting away from that. So that's the first thing we've been looking at. The second thing we've been looking at is actually the kind of the fast charger. So within 15 minutes, we think that basically you could get enough, to do 150, 200 miles of distance, and at the same time grab a quick cup of coffee or wherever that goes with it. So we would look to get that a bit more funding, if you like, from that side of things. So we're thinking probably only 20 high-speed charging points. We would also have some premium charging where you can trickle feed. That will be in place. But the reality is we're only looking probably at 30 high-speed, and I'm guessing a couple of hundred premium spaces. And thereafter, we'll have staff separate from that. So staff will be separate, because that's different, because that is all about, not all your staff not living in a place where they can charge things, living on the, the cars being on the street, etc. And that move towards charging your car at work is probably going to be with us, we think, especially in Bristol. But in terms of passengers, we only think high speed and premium, because we really don't think, well, we know that we won't be able to afford to do it, and B, if everything plugged itself in at the same time, probably the pipe to the airport would melt. So we've got to think about that. But it's something, if anybody has got any better ideas over lunch, come and yank my chain. I'm more than happy to take some insight, because I'm not an expert.
I think that's quite an offer, but maybe go with a bit of money as well to support him. That might sweeten the offer. The gentleman here at this table.
Is that one? Is it a similar question, I suppose, or maybe a kind of a counter question? Notwithstanding all the problems that you just kind of listed, having 20,000 vehicles or 20,000 spaces not being used or sat stationary, plugged in for potentially quite long periods of time. Sounds like quite a good recipe for vehicle to grid, for storage, huge amounts of opportunity for you to potentially, put solar around your site, fill cars up, sell it to the grid, maybe guarantee a charged up car when you come back from your holidays. Is that any of that part of your master planning?
Being honest with you, we're looking at it, but we haven't put that into our plans at the moment. How can I say this? I was talking to the gentleman to your left earlier. What we don't want to be is the first guinea pig that wrecks 10,000 batteries by doing it first. Being honest with you, we're going to build in the flexibility into our systems so that we can do it at a later date. But we're not going to do it. We're not going to be the guinea pigs by any means. We think that's probably a big insurance claim coming in our way if we did that. So we're not going to do it. But that's not to say that we won't do it in the future. And the solar, we are looking at the solar anyway and looking at ways of, of transferring energy from solar. And we are looking at possibly hydrogen plants from solar straight to hydrogen and storing hydrogen as a possibility for any excess energy. So that's something we are looking at rather than batteries.
So it looks like you're working to build in the flexibility of how the business models develop, and as the technology prices come down, which they will.
But we won't be doing it. We won't be the first. We're not the first one off the blocks. Okay. Definitely not.
There's a guy with weighing up his risks very well. Any further questions? Okay. If that's not the case, then please join me in thanking Andrew for his really insightful presentation. Thank you very much.
Now, I won't keep you very long, but I just need to give you some information because it's lunchtime, and